What does it mean to you to be scared? When you try to actualize the emotion of fear to someone, what would you describe it as? Maybe it's something silly like spiders or clowns. Maybe you're thinking of more implemented ideas, such as jump scares, haunted houses, or other things. Or perhaps you're like me, and when you think of fear, you think of something much less trivial, much less simple. If you're like me, you define fear as pure, genuine discomfort, confusion, or a general sense of dread. Maybe a sense that you're not alone. Maybe a sense that you're being watched, or a sense that whatever you're watching on a screen could possibly happen to you in real life. But above all, a sense that you are not safe. Analog horror is a brand new type of horror-based fictional media that's recently exploded in popularity. It's frequently distinguished by low-quality visuals, cryptic text, and visual trends evoking analog records and late 20th century television. This is done to fit the time period, since analog horror films are almost always set in the 1960s through the 1990s, or presented to have been recorded on hardware from that era. It's known as analog horror because it incorporates aesthetic components from analog electronics, including analog television and VHS, and analog format for recording video. Recently, analog horror has mainly been seen through YouTube web series, such as the Mandela Catalogue, the Walton Files, fan-made Five Nights at Freddy's VHS tapes, Kane Pixel's Backrooms, and much more. But recently, the medium has started to expand. Poppy Playtime has been creating official VHS-type analog horror shorts to tease their new game, Chapter 3. The Skinamarink is a film that was recently released that's entirely of analog horror cinematic methods, and Kane Pixels, the creator behind the Backrooms analog horror series, is now working on a professional film with Studio A24. Today, I'll walk you through this amazing newer medium as I talk about its history, its rise to fame, its most impactful pieces of media, and how its rise to popularity has changed not only the internet, not only video games, not only Hollywood, but the world of fictional production forever. In 2010, an internet phenomena was discussed in the public eye, which began internet horror's steady incline. On November 12, 2010, Austin Considine from the New York Times published an article titled "Bored at Work? Try Creepypasta or Web Scares." In this article, Considine discusses and highlights what was quickly becoming an incredible important staple of internet culture: creepypasta. Eventually, these internet stories known as creepypasta would grow further and further, giving us stories like Ben Drowned, Slenderman, Jeff the Killer, and so much more. These had a huge impact online, from spin-off games to Minecraft mods and skins, fan art, and yes, really off-putting fan fiction between Slenderman and Jeff the Killer. These characters and stories led internet culture for a while, in the way that you see Huggy Wuggy, Freddy Fazbear, and even Garden of Banban characters used on children's YouTube. They're slapped onto thumbnails, used in animations, and more, just like the creepypastas were. So that's how I'm giving you an idea of the hold creepypastas had on the internet, until a tragic event hit America.
An ABC News exclusive. You're going to meet a young woman with an extraordinary story of survival. She was the victim of a crime that shocked parents everywhere. Stabbed 19 times, allegedly by two of her friends, who said they were trying to impress a fictional internet character called Slenderman.
Anissa Weier and Morgan Geiser, two 12-year-old girls from Waukesha, Wisconsin, led their classmate Peyton Leutner into a forest on May 31st, 2014, where they fatally stabbed her 19 times in an effort to please the creepypasta figure known as Slenderman. Leutner survived 6 days in the hospital after crawling to a road where she was discovered. Weier and Geiser received penalties of 25 years to life and 40 years to life, respectively, but were judged not guilty by reason of mental illness or defect and confined to mental health facilities. Weier received an early release after serving 7 years, and she will remain under watch until she turns 37. After this, a dark veil went over the internet fictional horror community. Creators stopped using these characters, talking about them, animating them, or even playing games with their name. The horror community did not bounce back until 2015 with the release of Five Nights at Freddy's, which pushed the internet horror community into two categories: those who are huge fans of video games, generally those along the lines of indie mascot horror, and those who would go on to produce their own horror subgenre of film. I present to you the internet's first popular analog horror series, Local 58. Local 58 is a fictional horror-themed television station that gained popularity through a series of online videos and stories. It was created by Chris Straub, a webcomic artist and writer. Local 58 presents itself as a small, independent broadcasting station with a unique and unsettling style, and the internet fell in love. Local 58 accumulated a huge fan base, had YouTubers reacting and talking about it, and amassed millions and millions of views on YouTube. The premise of Local 58 revolves around a series of broadcast interruptions, typically in the form of public service announcements or late-night programming. These interruptions often contain eerie and disturbing content that explores themes of existential dread, psychological horror, and the manipulation of mass media. The videos produced by Local 58 are presented in a found footage style, adding to the sense of realism and making it appear as if they were legitimate broadcasts. The production quality is intentionally low, resembling VHS tapes from the 1980s and the 1990s, which contributes to the overall atmosphere of unease. This found footage style would go on to be officially coined the name of analog horror, and thus a new genre of internet entertainment was born. Analog horror spent the next half of a decade fighting with indie gaming horror for the spotlight. While many YouTubers would touch on it, it would never get nearly as much mainstream coverage, but eventually, something changed. A creator stepped forward with the idea to combine the two mediums and open the door for so many people to get introduced to analog horror. On December 5th, 2019, a creator known as Scrimpus Mcgrimpus posted a video titled Facial Recognition Testing, the very first popular Five Nights at Freddy's based piece of analog horror. This video featured a character consistently running tests on a Toy Bonnie animatronic as they're attempting to implement a facial recognition system. Eventually, the animatronic goes haywire after being shown a picture of someone who we can only assume is William Afton, a character from the game's lore. It's then revealed that the animatronic gets violent when shown a picture of Afton. After the recording ends, it cuts to a picture of Afton, presumably the picture shown in the before video to Toy Bonnie, and it repeats a robotic chant, filling the viewer with as much suspense as possible.
Criminal.
And the video ends. While that video may be the first entry in the original Scrimpus Mcgrimpus Five Nights at Freddy's VHS series, it's by far my favorite. That ending sequence is still one of, if not the most unsettling pieces of media I've ever experienced. Sure, I was only 16 when I saw it, and it was mid-quarantine, but it's so beautifully done. The morphed, disfigured face of Afton at the end is a sight that I will never forget. This entire series focuses on expanding and clarifying the creator's interpretation of the Five Nights at Freddy's lore in such a chilling and visually intelligent way. This person used unreal amounts of film techniques, leaving the project with an extremely professional touch. This project opened the door to so many people. After its release, it got tons of reactions from YouTubers, fans, and even game devs, all who never really interacted with analog horror before. We now have games being made in the style of analog horror, where creators are playing as the characters in found footage type films. And Poppy Playtime is even creating custom analog horror shorts to advertise their new game, Poppy Playtime Chapter 3. So many people have created their own VHS-type videos for their favorite horror games, including dozens of separate series on Five Nights at Freddy's and an entirely different, very popular analog horror standalone based on FNAF, called the Walton Files. But I'm not here to keep rambling about video games. Now that we understand analog horror's rise to the public eye and how it became such a well-known genre, let's talk about what I deem the two most influential independent story projects within the space: the Mandela Catalogue and Kane Pixel's Backrooms. During COVID, many independent filmmakers sitting in their home ended up taking that time to produce, since they had nothing else to do. Let's start with what I'm most known for on my channel, the Mandela Catalogue. I made a series of videos where I reacted to this analog horror show, and it was very well received, and to this day is the best performing thing I've made on YouTube to date. YouTuber Alex Kister developed the analog horror online series, the Mandela Catalogue, in 2021. The story takes place in the made-up Mandela County of Wisconsin, where doppelganger alternates harass residents by forcing them to off themselves before adopting their identities. This series has not only made a huge cultural impact with memes and more, it spawned one of the current most popular horror entities, alternates. As mentioned before, alternates are entities that torment their victims to the point of suicide, only to take on the identities of their victims after the fact. It gets much more complicated, but if you just search alternate, people are making fan projects on TikTok and YouTube, writing their own spin-off stories, and even creating indie games that center entirely around identifying alternates. Another piece that makes the Mandela Catalogue stand out to me is its clear attentiveness to religious allusions. Lucifer, who is protected pretending to be Gabriel, the archangel who heralded the birth of Jesus, is one of the plot's main elements. Numerous biblical allusions are present throughout the series, including those to Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, and the surroundings of American churches as setting for many of the bone-chilling sequences during the story. Set during the 1990s and 2000s, 11 short films currently make up the Mandela catalog, which has 2 acts, and the first episode was originally released on June 9th, 2021. It belongs to the analog horror found footage subgenre. Its episodes are styled after VHS tapes and are presented as how-to movies from the fictitious department of temporal phenomena, or distorted editions of the cartoon beginner's Bible. For instance, many of the episodes include moments where it's a TV broadcast, and you're in situations where it's like, if this happens, do this. For another example, in the first video of the Mandela catalog, titled Overthrown, a corrupted tape of the beginner's Bible is featured. It shows a different interpretation of the birth of Jesus, in which a different person, impersonating Gabriel, deceives man at the announcement to the shepherds and claims to be their true savior. The episode comes to a close with a monologue from an unidentified character who claims to have been imprisoned in a tomb of sand and asks for aid from God, and then it ends. Kister has little to no budget and has used basic editing. All scenes are shot in his home, and all characters within the story are portrayed by his friends through still images and voiceover. Even the creator's mother once played an alternate. This type of creativity and at-home resourcefulness is what gives almost all of analog horror its charm. According to Alex Kister, the series started out as a creative outlet for the existential crisis he was going through, particularly when it came to religion and Christianity. The isolation and lack of security Kister felt as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak served as another source of inspiration for the series. Horror movies like The Shining and The Exorcist, as well as other analog horror shows like The Walton Files, Gemini Home Entertainment, Local 58, Surreal Broadcast, The Minerva Alliance, and Marble Hornets, have all been recognized by Kister as having a significant effect on his work. His goal with the Mandela catalog was to make something more based in discomfort as opposed to in-your-face terror. Or, in his words, the project consists of jump scares that cause a physiological reaction rather than a psychological reaction. But now it's time for us to talk about the most recent and most successful analog horror project to ever touch the internet. The Backrooms are an urban legend that first appeared online in a creepypasta that was uploaded on a 4chan thread in 2019. The Backrooms, one of the most well-known examples of the internet aesthetic of liminal spaces, which portray often bustling locales as unnaturally vacant, was initially described as a maze of empty office rooms that can only be visited by no clipping out of reality. On May 12, 2019, an unidentified person began a topic on the 4chan board X with the request that members post unsettling images that just feel off. One of these entries featured the Backrooms' initial image, which showed a wide, open space with carpeting, yellow walls, and fluorescent lighting from a Dutch angle. The location of the photo's capture is unknown. However, it surfaced on April 21st, 2018 in another thread. The first explanation of the Backrooms was provided in a comment by another user to this post. If you're not careful and you clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the Backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you. Made by an anonymous 4chan poster on May 13th of 2019. Users started posting stories about the Backrooms on subreddits like r/creepypasta and later r/backrooms a few days after the first creepypasta. As a fandom grew up around the Backrooms, the creepypasta's original authors improved it by adding new levels and floors, as well as the creatures that inhabit there. Users specifically mentioned 2 further levels. Level 1, which had industrial architecture, and Level 2, which featured lengthy service tunnels and was originally known as Level 0. While that may seem confusing, the Backrooms instantly became a staple of internet culture, deriving challenge videos, animations, games on Roblox and Steam, and most notably, the most popular analog horror creation of all time. A short movie called The Backrooms Found Footage was published on YouTube in January 2022. It follows a VHS video recorded by a filmmaker who unintentionally enters the Backrooms in the 1990s and is being pursued by a monster. This film was made by Northern Californian Kane Parsons, who was 16 at the time. Kane Parsons is better known online as Kane Pixels. The Backrooms setting was made by Parsons over the course of a month using the programs Blender and Adobe After Effects. He claimed that the Backrooms were a manifestation of hazy memory in the late 1990s and early 2000s. As of May 2023, the video has received over 48 million views. The fanbase lauded the film, while critics gave it favorable reviews. The video was dubbed the scariest video on the internet by WPST, while Dread Central and Nerdist compared it favorably to the 2019 video game Control. Otaku USA classified it as analog horror, and Kotaku commended the series for being subtle in its mystery and dread. Like the controversial 2018 film adaptation of the creepypasta Slenderman, Boing Boing's Rob Bishiza prophesied that the Backrooms would someday be turned into a slick but dismal 2-hour Hollywood movie. Little did Rob know, he wasn't exactly wrong on that prediction, but we'll get to that soon. Kane Parsons expanded his movies into a collection of 16 shorts, adding plot elements like ASYNC, a company that established a doorway into the Backrooms in the 1980s and carried out research there. Over 100 million people have seen the entire series. As a result, there's been an increase in Backrooms content, especially on YouTube, and it's credited with bringing the Backrooms out of internet obscurity. Parsons won a Creator Honors Award at the 2022 Streamy Awards from the Game Theorists for his short films. Now it's time to quickly talk about how this project, and many others like it, have completely influenced the movie industry, starting with the news that Kane Pixels will be producing a Backrooms movie with Studio A24, the studio that made Hereditary, The Lighthouse, The Whale, and more. And on top of that, recently a film named The Skinamarink released, and it is comprised purely of analog horror techniques. And along with that, it's one of the most controversial horror movies of recent history, with almost every rating on Google being either 1 star or 5 stars. Either way, as we continue to grow into more facets of horror, we cannot ignore the internet's impact. With the FNAF movie set for release 2, internet culture has no longer stayed a niche thing. We are breaking into the mainstream, and analog horror is helping to lead the charge. Gone are the days of Slenderman Minecraft mods. We're in an area of your average Joe going to go see Five Nights at Freddy's, The Backrooms, and hopefully the Mandela Catalogue at their local theaters. Analog horror as a medium has spread so far and has carried so many creative young people to insane success, and its widespread impact cannot be denied. After doing all the research for this video, I'm only even more excited to see where it goes from here. And by the way, this happened after I finished the script, but I wanted to quickly talk about Ranboo's new show based on analog horror titled Generation Loss. This is just another example of creators going out of the box to create these over-the-top, yet still manageable productions. Generation Loss is a little bit more high budget than some of the other analog horror shows you'll see, as it's not really supposed to be recorded on a VHS, but it uses many of the same elements and thematic storytelling concepts. But yeah, shout out to Ranboo. That shit was awesome. Anyways, I've been Dino Nuggets. If you liked this video, consider subscribing. If you didn't, still subscribe. It won't hurt. And with that, I'll see you all next time. Peace.